Hello everyone, it is Marc Sabatella from Mastering MuseScore, and welcome to the MuseScore Café. So this is Wednesday, the 31st of May, and this is one of the months in which there's 5 weeks in the month, so we've got another topic to talk about before we get back to an Ask Me Anything session next week. So we're going to be talking about chords. We're going to be talking about all the different kinds of notations that exist to represent chords and harmony, and how MuseScore supports these things, how you can enter them, how you can work with them, etc. So that's what we're going to be dealing with today. And yes, I am still coming at us from Florida here, and I'll probably be back in Colorado next week. I expect to be anyhow, but hopefully everything works out okay technically here for today and tomorrow, because this is where I'm at. So while this music flies by, take a look at these chord symbols here, the B flat 7 that we're looking at. It's just one chord in this piece, right? It's this section of it that I talk over is just a one chord vamp, and it's designed for me to be able to talk over and not be distracting. That's the idea. So when it goes on, we're going to see some more chord symbols coming up in a moment, because I think I gave myself too many repeats, but I think it's going to go on now. Let's see, one more. Go on. Oh, okay. It's going to go on and show you some more chord symbols. So we'll talk about chord symbols, but we're going to talk about Roman numeral analysis and other things as well. So here's the remainder of the chord symbols, and you can see there's lots of different stuff, sharp 9 and all these things. We're going to be talking about the actual, how to interpret chord symbols. We're going to be talking about that in music, in the basic music theory course next week. So far, I've only talked about triads in the basic music theory course, but we'll be talking about 7th chords and sharp 9s and all the other things that we see in chord symbols. We'll talk about those more next week. So what I want to do right now is focus on what the things are that exist for chords. And we're going to focus on 3 of them. I'm going to briefly allude to another. So let's actually hop over to, here we go. This here is a handout that I posted for the theory course, and it uses triads, and you can see chord symbols above the staff, and you see Roman numerals below the staff, all right? So when I play this, I'll turn the volume back up. What we are hearing right now are the notes here. We are not actually hearing the chord symbols, but what you'll see is that you do have the ability to have the chord symbols play or not play as you see fit. So I'm going to show you how to enter these chord symbols here, and I'm going to show you how to enter the Roman numeral analysis and some useful things to know about it. So I'm going to flip over to an empty score here. And I've talked about chord symbols a number of times before, but this is the first time since MuseScore 4 came out that I've talked about chord symbols, and really not a lot has changed except for an important thing to know about shortcuts. And so we're going to talk about that in a moment. I'm going to enter a system break after the 4 bars here to kind of stretch out these 4 bars a little more, because it's going to make it easier to demonstrate what I want to demonstrate. I'm going to select this rest here, the default measure rest, and use Control K, which is the shortcut for chord symbol. Why Control K? Because Control C is already taken, right? Control C is already copy, or Command C on a Mac. So it's Command K on a Mac for chord symbols. So Control or Command K is our shortcut for chord symbols. And I'm going to enter, there's some things in MuseScore that are just as easy to do with either shortcut or by clicking somewhere. Entering chord symbols is definitely one of the ones where if you're going to do it, you're going to want the shortcut, because digging through the menu is a little bit of a pain. But I guess I'm going to go ahead and show you that. It's Add Text Chord Symbol down here. So you would have to do that to enter chord symbols. Now, you don't have to do this for every single chord symbol. You'll see how easy it is to enter a whole string of them. But to get started, that is how you can do things. So you can either do that or Control K, and you'll get a little, box here to enter your chord symbol into. So if I type a C, I've now entered C as my chord symbol. If I hit the space bar, it moves on to the next beat. Now, did you hear it play that chord? I certainly didn't. And is it because my volume is up? No, it's not. I'm going to enter another chord symbol here just to make sure it wasn't just hiccuping, but I think I know why. Okay, so I currently have things set to not play chord symbols. I think I turned it off for a demonstration the other day. So I want to turn chord symbols back on. I'm going to come to the gear icon over here, and this is the gear icon on the top toolbar in the playback section. You'll see play chord symbols. So now I've just checked that to re-enable chord symbols. And if I type in E and now press space, it plays the chord. There you go. So that's how you can control on kind of a global basis all chord symbols across all scores. You can turn them off using that gear icon. This is new in MuseScore 4. MuseScore 3 did not have a simple way to just turn off all chord symbols. You could do it score by score, and you can do that in MuseScore 4, but there wasn't a single global control for it as there is in 4. So 3 didn't have it, 4 does. So what's happening here is I'm entering chord symbols, like I'll type an F. When I hit space, notice it's just moving ahead. What it's doing is it's moving to the next beat. Space is the shortcut to say move to the next beat and allow you to enter another chord symbol. So if you need to enter a chord symbol, notice that I was able to enter 4 chords in this measure, even though there's no notes there. And that's kind of nice, because sometimes you do want multiple chords in a measure, even if there's either no notes or, say, a whole note. So space is this great shortcut to move one beat at a time. However, if you want to move a whole measure at a time, if I want to enter a G chord here and I'm done with this measure, if I don't want to see until the next measure, the shortcut for this is the thing that changed. The shortcut used to be tab. Tab is what you would press to get from the G in this measure to the next measure. But the thing is that tab is supposed to be defined for navigating the user interface. This is what accessibility standards call for, unless you're in particular types of text that are designed to support tabs within the text, and chord symbols are not. So tab really shouldn't be used for that. So for accessibility reasons, the shortcut has now changed to move to the next measure, and it's Control Right. And so notice that moved me to the next measure, and I can type a C, and if I press Escape, it kind of finishes. So it plays the chord and it takes me out of chord symbol mode. So in doing that, using space and Control Right or Command Right on Mac, I glossed over a couple of details that I want to now kind of come back and show you. So one is, well, first of all, if instead of a rest, this had been a note, so if I enter a C whole note, it's going to be the same thing. If I double click this C to edit the chord symbol C and then press space, you'll see it still goes on to the next beat. So it still allowed me to enter a chord symbol on every beat, whether it's a whole note or a rest in that measure. But what if there's 16th notes in this measure? I'm going to enter some 16th notes. I can type that particular melody really fast. Okay, so first of all, notice now that there's a couple things to know about chord symbols, and we get to discover them right now. MuseScore does a pretty good job of spacing things out so that the chord symbols don't collide with each other. However, it doesn't do anything special to prevent a chord symbol from overhanging the bar line. And so that's what's going here. We've got this chord symbol kind of hanging over the bar line, and therefore the next chord symbol, it doesn't collide with it. MuseScore is smart enough to make it not collide, but it solved the collision a way I wouldn't have wanted. It solved it by moving the C up. So let me show you how we're going to fix that. There's a number of ways you can do it. One would be to select the measure before and use the right curly brace to stretch out that measure. And if you stretch it out enough, eventually there's room before the bar line, and then the chord doesn't overlap as much and the C fits again. I'm not crazy about that approach personally. So I'm going to reset that because I don't want to have to make measures wider than I need to. I'll do it if I need to, but it's not my go-to. So I want to reset the stretch in here, and I want to let you know how to do that. So you saw that I used right curly brace to increase the stretch, and then you can use left curly brace to decrease the stretch. But how do I know when I'm back to sort of normal? I mean, somewhere in here is where it started, but I don't remember for sure. Well, there's a couple ways of doing it. In MuseScore 3, and in 4 for that matter, you can right-click the measure and go to Measure Properties, and you'll see Layout Stretch here. And you can just set that back to 1. 1 is the default stretch. It means neither numbers bigger than 1 would mean wider than the default. Numbers smaller than 1 would mean smaller than the default. 1 means the default width. So that's one way of resetting it, is to go there and make sure that value is 1. Another way is to go to the Format menu and then say Stretch, Reset Layout Stretch, and that will take whatever measures you've selected and reset their stretch. That works in both 3 and 4. MuseScore 4 also allows you to do that from within the Properties panel on the left. If you're in the Properties panel and then click on Appearance, you'll see Measure Width right here. It's basically the same thing. It's they just give it a different name to make it a little more obvious what it's about. So if I increase that value, you'll see the measure is in fact getting wider. Decrease it, it's getting narrower, and so forth, right? So if I hit the reset button on measure width, that sets it back. So I said that increasing the width isn't usually my favorite thing to do. What I will do instead is just move that G7 sus a little to the left until that C slides down and it looks like it fits. This is fine. Normally, let me actually enter some notes. If I enter some notes into this measure, you'll see that this G7 sus isn't, normally a chord symbol is supposed to be left aligned with, like if I reset that, I'm going to press Control R to reset it. The chord symbol is the left edge of the chord symbol aligns with the left edge of the note. That's how things would normally work. But it's not the end of the world if you need to just nudge it over with the cursor keys so that it's a little more centered. We're going to talk a little bit about the centering thing when I talk about fretboard diagrams a little later. So, so yeah, every once in a while you'll need to maybe if there's a chord symbol overlapping the bar line, you might need to move it over a little bit. That's something you might need to do, or use stretch, or some combination of the two. So what I really want to show here, though, now is about that space. If I double click where it says C, and then, to get back into chord symbol mode and hit space, it had been going beat by beat. But when there's 16th notes in there, or 8th notes for that matter, notice it stops on every note. And that's great if you need to enter a chord symbol, sooner than a beat. If you need to enter a chord symbol on the end of a beat or on a 16th subdivision. So it's great that space does stop on every note, but it does mean it might take you a long time to get to the beat that you want. By the way, Shift space moves backwards. Shift plus any of these shortcuts will move you backwards. So there's also the shortcut semicolon. Semicolon is a not super well-known one, but it's really useful. Semicolon moves you by beat, whether or not there's intervening notes. Notice that it skipped. I'm going to press semicolon right now, and notice it skipped right over the 16th and went right to the next beat. If I press it again, moves into the next measure, again moves, and now you'll see it's still moving beat by beat, even in these measures that don't have notes. So semicolon is actually kind of my favorite shortcut for entering chord symbols, because often I want it on a beat, but not only once a measure. But But yeah, you want to know these shortcuts. So that's kind of the basics of entering chord symbols. The couple other things you would want to know about it is notice that these chord symbols don't look like the ones in, like let me actually enter one chord symbol we saw. We saw C7 sharp 9. And notice to enter a sharp, I just typed the number sign or hashtag. So that hashtag or number sign, as soon as I hit escape or space or something to complete entry, it turns into an actual sharp sign, right? So it's good to know that that's so. And similarly, if I type a B, lowercase b, it turns into a flat sign. But notice, let me go back to the sharp. This formatting is like all these characters are the same size and at the same position. Well, there's basically two different styles of chord symbols in the world. There's more than two, but they all kind of fall into two camps. Traditionally typeset music, up until say 1990, whatever, when software started to become more of a thing, traditionally typeset music would use this style. C7 the same size, sharp sign the same size, 9 the same size. All these characters the same size on the same bar line. So if you find any like old style fake books, not ones that are meant specifically for jazz, but like pop fake books and things produced before, say, the 1990s, this is how the chord symbols would usually look. But meanwhile, musicians were often handwriting music. And when they handwrite music, they often do superscripting and other things like that because that's easy to do handwriting. It's not as easy to do if you're typesetting the music, and so the editors wouldn't bother. But oh, I need to flip over the cafe. You'll notice in the cafe we have this going on, right? The 7 is superscripted a little, and the sharp and the 9 are superscripted a lot. And it's in this sort of handwritten font to sort of emulate the look of a handwritten chart. Now, some people might think of this as an affectation, the handwrittenness of it, but it's not actually. And when I say an affectation, I mean like you might think, oh, there's no good reason if I have a typesetting program, no good reason to use a handwritten looking font. But I am going to challenge that assumption a little bit. There are advantages to handwritten looking fonts when it comes to readability. One has to do with the ratio of the height to the width, and then also that to the stroke thickness of the symbol. So if I take that other chord that I just entered and zoom in on it, you'll see that even when I make it as big as this was, let's go back, make it, let's try to get it about the same size. Notice that that are thicker strokes. So it's not just the handwrittenness of it, it's the thickness of the strokes, but that comes with handwritten music. It's certainly possible to get a font that doesn't look handwritten that still has thick strokes, and that's fine. But if it's uniformly thick, now it's too heavy. So there is something to be said for this style of thing that looks like it was made with a pen, like with a wide nib, and you get variation between thickness and thinness there. The other thing that happens is by superscripting this, it causes it to take up a little less room than it otherwise would. Notice how wide this chord symbol is compared to this one for the same height. For the same basic height of character, you can get a little less wide with superscripting, but more than that, it really makes the root of the chord stand out. And that's nice. When you're reading a chord chart like this, the first thing you want to see is the root of the chord. Everything else is gravy. Get the root right. Get the right root. And, you can put, yes, you want it major or minor. You want all the details, but let's focus first on the right root, then on the right major or minor, then on the right seventh, and then on the right extensions, right? So there's a priority that goes on in terms of what is the most important information. And this style of chord symbol kind of prioritizes things the way you want if you are reading, sight reading Like, and this happens a lot in the jazz world, you might sight read on, like in performance. You're a professional musician sitting on the bandstand and you are literally sight reading music you've never seen before and having to read chord symbols and turn them into what you play. And all these little things, these little details that I'm talking about, they do actually help. So I've talked about why you might want this. Now let's make sure you know how to do it. So by default, you normally get this type of chord symbol unless you use one of the jazz templates. When you create a new score, as I'm about to do here, when you create a new score, if you choose one of the jazz templates, you will you'll have that fancy chord symbol by default. So I'm waiting for this thing to start because, of course, while I'm broadcasting, everything is slow, and I'm just trying to get used to that. But I'm meanwhile going to show you how to just change. Okay, so now I get my new score finally. Okay, under the jazz section here, when I click on the jazz section, you'll see jazz lead sheet, big band, and jazz combo. If I pick the jazz lead sheet template and say done, then the score that gets created is going to use that handwritten style by default. And it uses it also for the clef and the time signature and everything else. That also is not an affectation. That actually has some value, the rate, but it's not so much. Yeah, it's the same thing. It's the ratio of the thickness of this to the thickness of that that's typical of handwritten scores, like how thick the bar line is relative to the staff lines. These are all kind of things. So I'm going to enter that C7 sharp 9 here, C7 sharp 9. And when I enter it, notice it's using the handwritten font already, but everything's all sized the same. When I hit escape, though, it definitely does that thing. So since, let me see, you told me how to pronounce your name yesterday, Joachim. No, I'm not there. I kind of got a U sound out of it. Joachim. I'm sorry. I'll get it next time. So you're asking about a couple other symbols. So the procedure is essentially the same. So certainly if you use one of the jazz templates, it's identical. Almost everything I'm talking about here is the same between them, other than the actual shortcut for next measure. Almost everything else is pretty much identical. So, so you've got in here, if you want the half diminished symbol, that's good to know. So you can type C07, and now when I hit escape, you'll see I get the half diminished symbol. Why 0? Well, because if you're old enough to remember dot matrix printers and the fonts that went with them, zeros used to have slashes through them. That was the only way on an old cheap dot matrix printer you could tell the difference between a 0 and an O was by putting a slash through the 0. So we're relying on people remembering the 70s, basically. In any case, 0 will give you that half diminished symbol. And other symbols you might want to know is lowercase o, for diminished, and you asked about the triangle. If you use a caret, you know, that guy, you will get the triangle for major 7. So that's how you can get those symbols. Now, I don't particularly recommend these symbols, especially in handwritten charts. It's way too easy for any of these to be mistaken for diminished, and they will all sound terrible if you play them that way. So I personally don't recommend these symbols. Most major publishers, for what it's worth, in the jazz world use MA and MI, so MA7. In small caps like this is, and MuseScore does that automatically. This is the standard used by almost every single major publisher these days in the jazz world. And outside the jazz world, it's MAJ. The triangle is really something used in handwritten charts and almost nowhere else. And again, I don't really recommend it, but it is available. So so there you go. So that's some stuff about entering these things. Now let's come back over here and let me show you how to change this. If I go to Format, Style, And then the style dialog here, if I scroll down to where it says chord symbols, you'll see appearance. I can choose between standard and jazz style. So let me move this out of the way so we can see what happens as I click it. If I click jazz, I have the jazz style. There you go. So that's how you get that style. Now, I'm going to not do that. I'm going to hit escape so that I don't actually do that. But if instead you click this and go to the properties panel, you can change the font from Edwin to MuseJazz text specifically. You can change it and you get the font, but you don't get the fancy superscripting and so forth. So you can change that font, and then that's kind of nice, because then if you do that, then you'll, well, I didn't set it as style, but if you set your style to that font, then, you know, while you're editing, you will see it. But yeah, you won't get the fancy superscripting unless you use the actual jazz appearance within the format dialog. So so there you go. So Marla, no, we're talking about the triangle in chord symbols here. We're talking about the chord symbol that was here instead of MA. If you use this triangle to mean this means major, or it means major seventh. Some people just use C triangle to mean major seventh. Other people use C triangle to mean a major triad, and that's an older style still. So that's another reason why I don't really recommend it. It is a bit ambiguous. So yeah, I mean, I've done whole sessions on chord symbols and all the intricacies of the syntax here, but I want to also cover the other things that have to do with notations of chords. If you have more questions about chord symbols, I'll get them in, but I want to show you a little bit about the other things that exist in MuseScore. So one of them is Roman numeral analysis. So if I click, and those are typically placed below the staff. So if I click the rest below the staff here and go to add text, Roman numeral analysis, I have defined my own shortcut for it, Control-Shift-R, because I use Roman numeral analysis enough to need it. By default, that shortcut is not defined. But notice I really only had to press Control-K a few times. Mostly I was just using space to move from beat to beat. But yeah, if you're going to use Roman numeral analysis a lot, you might want to define a shortcut for it. And so I've done that. It's Control-Shift-R. And as if you've never seen this before, I always like to make sure I show you how to customize shortcuts. It's Edit, Preferences, Shortcuts. And then there's a search box here. You can type Roman and then click the search results and then define. And this is where you would actually press the shortcut that you want to be the shortcut for Roman numeral analysis. So I've already defined it. So I can now press Control-Shift-R and I get the same sort of thing of a cursor below, and I can type a 1. And the same shortcuts exist as for chord symbols. Space that moves to the next beat or the next note. Now I can type 1V, and I can type a 1, and I can type 5, 7. Sus, Roman numeral analysis. Analysis is about analyzing. It's not necessarily about capturing every detail of a chord symbol. So normally you wouldn't put the symbol sus in a Roman numeral analysis, but you might. You might want to put in a 4 to say that, and then to say that there's a 4th in there. That's sometimes a thing. Now, Allison has a good question about the difference between Roman numeral analysis and figured bass. I can partially address that today and then maybe partially address it tomorrow. So notice, though, one thing here. When I typed 5, 7, notice the 7 superscripted immediately. And when I typed 4, it's subscripted immediately. Same if I put 6/4, which is the traditional American, or basically everywhere except UK, way of indicating a second inversion chord. It does the superscripting automatically right away. In fact, even if I type 7 sharp 9, that notice when I typed the number sign, it turned into a sharp sign right away. All these things happen automatically with Roman numeral analysis, and that is because, as I explained in the newsletter, or in the tip of the week that went with the newsletter, this is all done by a font called Campagna. And because it's done by a font, it can happen even while you're typing it. And then you can use that font in a word processor or whatever else. So the question about what's different about Roman numeral analysis versus figured bass, I'm going to put in something similar here. I'm going to use Control G. That's the shortcut for figured bass. In order for figured bass to be a thing, first of all, we need notes. Chord symbols and Roman numeral analysis don't need any notes, but figured bass implies the existence of an actual bass note. So it's not that MuseScore needs a note there, it actually doesn't. Musically, you need to have the bass note written. So the way figured bass actually works is you write in your bass note. You write in a C, and then an E, and then an F, and then a G. And the way figured bass works is, if I press Control G, you put in either the number 5 or nothing to mean a root position chord. And then for this first inversion chord, you just write the 6. So and I'll show you, I'll put the chord symbols above this also. In fact, let me just do that first. I'm going to delete that chord symbol, Control K. This would be a C chord, and then a C chord with an E in the bass, and then an F chord, and then a G chord. And then Roman numeral analysis wise, this is a 1, a 1, 6, a 4, and then I'll call this 5, 7. I'll put a 7th on that G. So let me keep entering this. So notice the chord symbol here says C over E, meaning a C chord with an E in the bass. The Roman numeral analysis puts the capital 1 there to indicate the root of the chord is still C. The 6 indicates first inversion. Figured bass, though, doesn't notate the root. Figured bass predates the notion of roots. It sort of predates the idea that all combinations that we might want to use of notes harmonically add up to triads. It's a concept that is kind of inherited from Renaissance notation, especially in lute music, I think. I think that's where it started. Yeah, I could actually be wrong about that. But so it uses the bass note here, E. And then this 6 means play a 6th above that E, which is a C. And then you're supposed to know, well, also put in a 3rd above because they sound good. And so and you could actually write in a 3 also. So you can actually hit enter and put the 3 below it. The figured bass facility isn't smart enough to just do that automatically. If I type 6, 3, I'll get them next to each other. If you want figured bass stacked, you hit enter between them. But normally you just enter the 6. And then on this chord here, again, we're going to write 5. 5 is the notation to mean root position. It means play the note a 5th above, but most commonly we don't even write it in at all. We just leave that note, we just leave that blank. And that means basically play a root position triad. And then for that 7th chord, we'll just put in the 7. So it's a different way of conveying essentially the same information. Roman numeral analysis focuses on the root of the chord and uses the numbers to kind of tell you what inversion it is. Figured bass focuses on the actual bass note by actually writing it in on the staff, and then uses the numbers to tell you, what kind of chord you're building above it. So you have to look at that E and that 6 and know that means, oh, it's not an actual E chord, it's a C chord with an E in the bass, and you sort of have to do the math in your head to figure that out. So learning to play from figured bass is a skill in itself, and I know how to do it, but I can't do it fast. I'm going to have to translate it into chord symbols in order for me to really be able to play it well. But anyhow, that's the difference. So, but the same basic method of entry works for all of these. You type, you start the entry, you type whatever you want to type, and then you hit space to move to the next beat, or control right to move to the next measure. Now, there's something that I'm a little curious about. I know some of you are on Macs, and on some Mac keyboards, Command right does not work. By the way, the reason I mentioned that we changed from Tab to Control right because of accessibility reasons, to make sure that Tab does its normal function. In fact, if I double click this and press Tab, watch what happens. You're going to see where it says Workspace, you're going to see that highlight. That's because keyboard focus has now moved here. And if I now press space, it opens that dialog. So Tab is how you move around the interface. In MuseScore 3, there were a number of things in the interface that were very hard to get to. Some of them were impossible to get to. MuseScore 4 has enabled Tab to work in more standard ways, but that meant making this change. So in theory, Control right is the shortcut to move from measure to measure while in chord symbols. It's also the shortcut in like node input mode. If I'm in node input mode and I press Control right, it also moves to the next measure. It's also in normal mode. If I select a note and press Control right, notice it moved to that note. Control right moved to the rest there. Control left, that is. So Control left and Control right are the next measure and previous measure shortcuts regardless of what mode you're in. On Mac, it's Command left and Command right. Mac keyboards, they are not working. And we've always had issues with like certain things. Sometimes it was a French Windows computer where they're not working, and now it's like certain Mac ones where there's always like certain things, because every keyboard has a different layout. There's ones that are QWERTY across the top. There's AZERTY, A-Z-E-R-T-Y. Some of them have numbers that you need to press shift to get to the numbers. It's insane the number of different variations of keyboards that MuseScore has to support. So every release, there's some keyboards that don't work that well, or that certain commands have to be customized. So right now, you might have a computer, especially if you're on Mac, where Control right or Command right won't move you to the next measure. If that is the case, I would love it if you would try downloading, and I'm going to actually put the link in here. I'm going to pop over to MuseScore.org and show you the link to this. I want anyone who's having that problem. Come on, I didn't actually want to search. I just want to go there. MuseScore.org. I just want to go to download software and then scroll down to where it says development builds and then nightly builds downloads page. So I'm going to paste this link into the chat. If you are having any problem with Control left and Control right, or Command left and Command right not working while entering chord symbols, I want you to go to that page, and let me actually show you what you're going to do. You're going to go to where it says nightly builds for whatever operating system you're on, Mac OS. You click on that, and then you'll see all these ones that say MuseScore nightly latest, and that's the one you want. So this will download a nightly build. And this is on Mac. It's a DMG file. You download it, you double click it, or do whatever you do to open it. And it will install itself, I think, without, hopefully on Mac. I've never done it on Mac, so I don't own one. But it should install itself side by side with your existing MuseScore 4. In other words, it won't replace your existing MuseScore 4. They should both be side by side. If it does replace it, well, you can just re-download MuseScore 4 when you're done. But on Windows and Linux, it definitely doesn't replace it. So if you install that, you should be able to try out and see if the changes they made work on your keyboard. They do on the keyboards that have been tested so far. No one has yet tested this and said it doesn't work for me. But we would love more people to test. So that would be really nice to know if that's working. for more people. All right. So I've talked about chord symbols, I've talked about Roman numeral analysis, and I've talked about figured bass a little bit here. There's a couple other things you would need to know. There's a lot more things you would need to know about chord symbols, what the 7 actually means, what the sharp 9 means, right? And we talk about that in music theory will be over the next few weeks. And same with Roman numeral analysis. I'll be explaining more about what this all means. And I did give sort of a brief rundown of the difference between Roman numeral analysis and figured bass, and talked about the different notations for Roman numeral analysis. While I'm on the subject, I do want to talk about the British system here. So I said that 1 here means just the 1 chord, right? A C chord. This 1/6 is rest of world other than UK way of saying the 1 chord in first inversion. The UK version of that would be the letter B. But letter B turns into a flat sign. So we need a way to defeat that. And we're going to do that by pressing \B. And now you can have the letter B. So if you want to use the UK method of Roman numeral analysis, you'll have to put a \/ before your B to get the letter B. And yes, this is absolutely right about to get the chord symbols to display. If I write, you can do it either by right-clicking, and I can right-click it and say realize chord symbols, and it gives you this dialog box with some options that let you override some of the defaults. But if you then press OK, it gives you the notes there. So, and it will overwrite whatever already on the staff. So you might want to do that on a scratch staff if you're just playing around. And then this way you can edit it and, change the rhythm and so forth. So I've talked about chord symbols, talked about Roman numeral, talked about figured bass. The one other pillar here is going to be fretboard diagrams. So the question is about how that B connects to first inversion. It's just how it's done in the UK, or at least used to be. Graham, if you're saying you haven't seen it in a while, could be that some UK textbooks are. Although, are you in Australia? Or are you in England? I can't remember which country you're actually in. Scotland? No, I'm just guessing. But no, there are definitely textbooks still that use the B, C, D method, but maybe not universally. So the way this works is A means root position, B means first inversion, C means second inversion, D means third inversion when we're talking about 7th chords. It's just the way that system works. And so that was the article in my newsletter that I kind of discussed those differences. And it's just the way it is. Just different terminology. So I want to talk about the last pillar here. I've talked about, again, chord symbols, Roman numeral analysis, figured bass, fretboard diagrams are the next thing to talk about. And for those, I'm going to need to go to the palettes. And if you look at my palettes here, I don't see fretboard diagrams. And that is because I am in my special demo workspace where I haven't added all my palettes so that I could show you how to do it. I'm going to click Add Palettes. And then I'm going to scroll down to where it says fretboard diagrams and press plus. And that adds the fretboard diagrams to my palettes. So now if I click that again to close it, you'll see fretboard diagrams here. And if that's not where you want it in your palettes, you can drag it down to maybe just below keyboard or wherever you feel like you want it to be. Oh, I'm so glad to hear that command right click is working for you. Oh, wait a minute, command right, not click, right? Just command right. So just command plus the right cursor key is really, because command right click would be a select thing. So hopefully that's what you meant. So fretboard diagrams, I'm going to open this palette now, and you'll see these are palettes. These are diagrams that show you how these chords are actually played on the guitar, right? They are pictures of a fret, of a guitar fretboard. So if I add this first one here, notice they only show the diagram, but if I hover over it, you'll see a chord symbol in it. It's actually going to add it, both of them. So Allison, it's good to know that you also are confirming that you haven't really seen the ABC system for a while. I see it online sometimes, and I've seen 1 or 2 people request it, but mostly older people. I haven't seen any younger people request it. So yeah, that could well be a thing that most textbooks these days have gone to the international system. So I'm going to click that C chord symbol, and notice even though in the palette it's not showing the chord symbol other than through the tooltip when I hover over it, when I add the fretboard diagram, it does show the chord symbol. And of course, early music doesn't use chord symbols. Yes, that would be something that you would just see in analysis, and you wouldn't see it in analysis of early music, which people usually mean pre-Baroque. You would only start to see Roman numeral analysis in analysis of Baroque and later music, because that's when they really started thinking in terms of chords. So this is a fretboard diagram. And when you add one, you get these predefined ones. You get the triads, basically. So you get C, C minor, C7. And then D, D minor, D7. There's a whole lot of chord symbols you don't get. Like, for instance, I didn't get a C sharp chord. I didn't get a C sharp minor chord. I certainly didn't get C7 sharp 9, right? You only get a certain limited number of predefined chord symbols that are here. And Stephen's asking if any English composers use the old system. So one thing to realize is that you wouldn't necessarily know what the composers use in their own mind, because we don't publish Roman numeral analysis other than in textbooks, right? Your music, published music, won't have Roman numerals in it. Chord symbols, yes, if it's jazz or pop music in which people are trying to play from the chord symbols. But classical music isn't going to have Roman numeral analysis in it, nor will jazz or any other style. That's only for analysis. So it's something you see in textbooks, not in published music. So it's hard to know what any given composer might use in the privacy of their own home. Unless they're publishing an analysis of their own music, you probably wouldn't know. So let's see, Allison, about this. So the fretboard diagram, we're not going to get the bass strings, but I want to show you how to customize these, because that's where I was leading with this. If I add one of these, all I can add are C chords, D chords, E chords, F, G, A, and B. I can't get chords starting with accidentals, and I can't get sharp 9 chords or sus chords or all these other kinds of chords. These are the predefined chords here, but I'm not limited to these. So yes, and there's a ukulele palette floating around that you can download and load into MuseScore. Bob, if you want to, if you know where you can get that link and want to post it in the chat, by all means, go ahead. But yeah, there are additional palettes you can download that other people have created. But I want to show you how to create your own. And Joachim, thank you for confirming the shortcut, and also sorry for continuing to butcher names. It takes me a while to get names right. So notice these are separate elements. There's the chord symbol and there's the fretboard diagram. The chord symbol has the playback built in. The fretboard diagram is just for show. When I added the fretboard diagram, it added them both, but I can position them independently. I can move the chord symbol without moving the fret diagram. If I move the fret diagram, it moves the chord symbol with it, but then I can move the chord symbol, right? So they're independent, but the chord symbol kind of is attached to the fret diagram. So when you move the fret diagram, the chord symbol moves with it. So I'm going to select them both and use Control-R to reset them. And by the way, that's what I use Control-Right for. I clicked this one and then Control-Right to select that one. That's how you can create a selection of multiple elements. So with this, and that I just did that to be able to reset it. So now I have the fret diagram selected. I can go to Properties and check this out. So here is where you can define all sorts of things about your fret diagram. You can define I forget. I haven't used fret diagrams a whole lot, and I have to remember how to do things. But this X means don't play that low string. Don't play the E string. Why? Because if you played it, then it would be a C chord with E in the bass. So this X means don't play the E string. This is E, A, D, G, B, and C. And so this means to play that A string at the 3rd fret, so it'll be a C. This says to play the D string at the 2nd fret, so it'll be an E. This says to play the G string open. This says to play the B string at the 1st fret, so it'll be a C. This says to play the E string open, so it'll be E. If I go to Settings, you'll see here I can change the number of strings, the number of frets that show, and which is the 1st fret that's actually showing. Like if I change this to 4, now it's telling me that this is actually the 4th fret, that's the 5th fret, etc. So that's, or I guess this is the 4th fret, I forget the exact way it works, but that's a common thing done if you're trying to notate something that's high up on the neck of a guitar. You would put this number here to tell people that's how far to shift. So Allison, let's see, there's only 6 strings. So guitar has 6 strings. Oh, how many strings do you need? I've heard of like 13 coarse loops, but I mean, turn it up. Now I got, 13. Does that include 2 bass strings? I don't know. I'll just put 9 strings in here. So now I got 9 strings, right? So first of all, the fretboard diagrams don't play back. So fretboard diagrams don't care. Okay, so 8, let's go with 8. And then reset fret number back to 1. So because the fretboard diagrams don't play, they actually don't care about your tuning, right? So if you're using D, drop D tuning, I forget, the one in which the E string is tuned down to a D, then just, put the dots in. Again, the predefined palette doesn't know how to make a C chord that way or how to make all the different chords that way, but you can do this yourself. So if I go back to the, this section here, I can keep clicking where I want my frets to be, because I didn't show you how to actually do that. This is where you click where you want your frets to be. That's more fingers than I have, so I'd have to click another one to delete it, and maybe this is my actual fretboard diagram or whatever, but you can click where you want. So you're going to have to do the math yourself. You're going to have to do the math yourself to figure out which fret gives me which note, and if I want a G chord with this tuning, which frets will give me, which notes are in the G chord, and then which strings will do it. You've got to do all that thinking yourself. But, if you do the thinking, you can do this. So that will allow you to get this. Now, tablature is also worth mentioning in this same breath here. If I add a guitar tablature instrument, let me click add, and then strings plucked, acoustic guitar tablature. For the tablature, if I put in, I might go to this measure here and put in, that's a low E, right? The low E string on the 0 fret, that is a low E. But if you're using a D tuning, then yes, you can set up your tablature for that. Right-click the staff, go to staff part properties, and then under advanced style, no, it's here, sorry. It's here under edit string data. Now is when I can say, this is also where you would say how many strings, right? Number of strings, as well as what their pitches are. You can add strings here, remove strings. I want to take that low E2 and edit that to be D2. And now you'll see that that same E is 2nd fret. And if I lower it, E flat, D, right? So using staff properties, you can definitely get the playback on the tablature to be as expected, but with the fretboard diagram, it really doesn't matter. It won't change anything. Someday, we'd love to hook up the playback, because there's no reason, if you know the tuning of this, if you know the tuning of the instrument, and MuseScore does in order to do tablature, it should be able to figure out from this fretboard diagram what notes to play and play those notes. That would be lovely if MuseScore did that, and really it just needs someone to write that code. So DJENT, is that an actual word? Is that what you're saying, gent? So let me flip back to the actual thing here and see if I can see the picture. Oh wow, look at that thing. Oh my gosh, yeah. Well, that looks interesting. That's a handful, right? Cool. I've seen ones that have like 2 necks, and that seems like a little easier to deal with, because then you can you know, finger each one individually, but then strum across all of them. Lots of different ways of doing that. Lutes typically will have some strings that you don't actually finger at all. They're drone strings. At least I think that's true, right, Allison? And same with sitars and some other instruments that are designed to have drone strings that you don't pluck, but are there for resonance. So, yeah, that's how you add. And then once you've created your fancy custom thing, like, okay, so like I didn't do a C sharp chord. I'm going to put in a C sharp minor chord because by gosh, there should be I want a C sharp minor chord because we were just talking about C sharp minor, right, John? Was it John? I think so. We're talking about C sharp minor chord. So I'm going to add a C chord just to have something to start with. I'll edit the chord symbol to say C sharp minor. And now I'm going to think through this. A C sharp, ooh, now the picture does show up. Nice. Oh, double strung harps. That's interesting. So a C sharp minor chord, we could either play the E string or not. I think I'm going to not play it. Now the A string, instead of the 3rd fret, I need the 4th fret. So I'm going to select that guy, go to properties, and move it to 4th fret. And then this is the A string. I will play it on the 4th string as 4th fret as well. So it's another C sharp. Oh yeah, I click over here, not there. And then this is the, I already forgot, E, A, D, G. So I'm going to need a G sharp. So I'll play that on the 1st fret. And then this is the B string. I'll play it on the 3rd fret. And the E string open. So if I'm doing my math right, this would be a C sharp minor chord. Is it really how anyone plays C sharp minor, or do they really do a bar chord? That I couldn't tell you. But if I'm doing my math right, this is a C sharp minor chord. And therefore, I might want to come over to my palettes and just Control, Shift, drag this puppy into the palette. And now it's there. And it even got the name right. It took it off the chord symbol. I think MuseScore 3 didn't do that. I think in MuseScore 3, you might have had to set that up manually. Not positive. If you need to, you can right-click this and go to Properties and set the name here. And that's what the tooltip will display. So this is when people have created these custom ukulele palettes and so forth, or, you know, I'm sure lots of people have done it, you know, created all sorts of complicated voicings and made their own custom palettes. That's how you do it. You set up one of the things and then move it over. So how do you do a bar chord? So let's take a look at that. I'm going to come over to this chord here, come over here, and now, so I wish I remembered, but I think it's something like, no, it's not that. What if I click the bar? If I click the bar and then click here, there we go. Now when I'm clicking, notice so I've got bar selected in properties. Every time I click in, not that you would have multiple bars, let me clear, there we go. This is where I would enter the bar. So if I want it to be bar, say 4, that's again, E string, F, F sharp, G, G sharp. So, you know, that would be something I could do that would then give me the bar across there. And then, right now it's not showing me enough frets. So I could tell it, hey, show me some more frets by increasing that under visible frets, or I could change the starting fret number to be 4 and then move my bar here, right? You decide how you want your fret diagram to look. Those of you who are guitar players, you probably have a better idea of how you want it to look. I'm just showing you how to get once you have an idea of what you want. So this is now laying your finger across all the strings, and all I did was checked the box for bar. And now when you click, it creates a bar there. And then I can uncheck it so that I'm back to being able to place fingers. So that was the A string at 4th fret. 1, 2, 3, 4, which is my C sharp. And then, you know, I have to do my math and figure out where I need more O's here and where X's would be. So it is essentially the same as a capo. You're absolutely right. But it's now one that's movable, right? Because a capo, once you clamp that sucker on, it's kind of on. It's not on for good, but it's on for a few minutes at least. You're not going to change capo from chord to chord. Bar is basically a capo that you change from chord to chord, and it's how you make a lot of chords on guitar, because the way guitar is strung and traditionally tuned, the chords in the key of C and G are really easy to play. Chords and not even an F chord. F chords are sucky. You need a bar for those. So chords in sharp keys, E, yeah, G and D are easy to play, but as you get more sharps and as you get flats, you end up with situations in which there's no way to do it without doing the bar. And so bar chords are very commonly used in keys other than G or D, or if you're a jazz musician, you're going to play pretty much everything higher up in the neck, and bar everything is normally how that would work. Okay. So C sharp, oh, you got me a C sharp minor chord? I want to see it. I want to see your C sharp minor. So yeah, you've got the fourth bar, and then, so yeah, so that's your C sharp, and that's the D at fourth fret, which is an F sharp, and then two more frets for the finger. So you got your bar across here, you got a finger there to turn that F sharp into a G sharp, and then you've done the math or you've looked it up. So that's great. Oh, it's an A minor. Oh, I see what you. So that's a good way to do it. If you know how to make your basic minor chords, then by adding the bar, you can just say, oh, that same A minor shape, move it up. I don't know how to make minor chords. I only know four chords on guitar. I know G, D, D7, and C. Those are the only chords that I don't have to think about. And I actually have to think about C a little bit. So, so there you go. So yeah, these are the chords, E, A, D, G, and C. These are the easy chords on guitar, and E and A and D minor also, and that's why playing in the key of G ends up being easy, because those chords are all diatonic in that key. But as soon as you get to other keys, you end up with harder to play chords. All right, well, we managed to cover a whole ton of stuff. I'm impressed. So thanks for the discussion. Thanks for the questions that helped me make sure that I was able to cover what you all needed to see. So let's play some music and get on with things. I had a really good time showing you all this stuff about how to enter these things into MuseScore. We've started talking about the chords themselves and the Roman numeral analysis in the Basic Music Theory course. Tomorrow in Music Masterclass, you can expect us to talk more about the chords themselves. And let me give you a heads up. I want to do some more singing. So because of where I'm at, it's a little more than a little inconvenient for me to try to be at a piano tomorrow. It's possible I'll figure. I mean, I have a way I could do it, but it comes with some caveats and some questions about how it's actually going to work. So I'm not thinking I'm going to try to actually go from a piano. So you might think, how am I going to talk about chords without a piano? Well, what we're going to be doing is some more ear training. So I gave you that project involving listening to my brother's music with all those recordings of those American folk songs and talking about, trying to figure out chords by ear and play these voicings, these simple inversions that would connect smoothly. And I also just showed you a whole handout. Let me flip over to that handout for a second. This whole handout with all the voicings. I want you to work through that stuff, because tomorrow we're going to do some exercises where we do some ear training on this and some singing with it. And I would love it if people maybe got yourself in a place where you feel good about coming on with me, and we'll do some singing together, because we're going to be singing whole notes, and I think we can pull that off live. So I'd love it if people could want to maybe show up in a way where you can participate tomorrow. And if not, you'll still learn. So I'm looking forward to it. Hope everyone has a great day, great week, and see you next time. Bye.